Hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Christina Xenos. I'm a chef and a cookbook author based here in Los Angeles. And today I'm here to introduce you to a new cookbook called Saffron. This is a collaboration between me and photographer Brooke Sandor, and it's all about saffron, which is the world's most precious spice. Now, saffron is more expensive than gold. And why is that? Because saffron comes from the crocus flower, and the spice that you use are actually the 3 stigmas inside the flower. Now, all of this has to be harvested by hand. So in Greece, for example, this is happening right now. But instead of me trying to relay this all to you, Emily and I are going to take you to Greece in a video that she filmed while she was there. Did you all enjoy your trip to Greece? It's really amazing up there. I had a chance to visit Kozani a few years ago and talk to the people at the cooperative. It's actually very amazing how they've organized and really increased production over the last few years. And now Greece is the third largest producer of saffron in the world. They harvest about 4 to 5 tons every year, and that will be increasing as well. So one of the greatest things about this book is we give you all the basics. So we're going to talk about basic techniques. We're going to teach you how to apply saffron to your everyday cooking, because even though it's such a precious spice, it's really easy to incorporate into a lot of your recipes. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just take a few saffron threads and infuse them into warm water, like I've done here. It's basically a saffron tea. But you can see that just by adding a few of the saffron threads, I have a tea with beautiful golden color. Now, this is how people all over the world start their day, because saffron has a lot of antioxidants and medicinal properties in it. It makes it a very healthy choice for you, really just a way to wake up your body in the morning. Now I'm going to take you through a couple recipes in the book. I'm going to show you a few techniques on how to use saffron. We're going to make some really, really delicious dishes. Okay, now we're going to make a really lovely dish called Saffron Tomato Chicken Thighs. I took the inspiration for this recipe from the classic Greek dish called shrimp saganaki. And you might be familiar with saganaki as a cheese or as shrimp saganaki. And it's named for actually the pan in which you fry the shrimp or the cheese or eggplant, for example. And it's called a sahan, so you get saganaki from sahan. In this dish, we're going to be using chicken thighs. We're going to be using onions, garlic, and I really love cherry and grape tomatoes, so I'm actually using a mixture of cherry and grape tomatoes. And you can use any tomato that's in season, and if tomatoes aren't in season, feel free to use canned tomatoes. They're no problem at all and it'll go really well in this dish. And the crowning ingredient in this dish is saffron, and I will show you how we're going to work with it in this dish. But I want to get my chicken browning in the pan. So I'm going to add, my pan is warming up, and I'm going to add just a little bit of olive oil, and we're just going to brown the chicken because I want to render some of the fat out of the chicken skin. Now, if you're vegetarian or pescatarian, this dish is easily adaptable. You can use shrimp and make it sort of like a shrimp saganaki. You can use eggs and make it kind of like a shakshuka. And or you could use any kind of vegetables that you might like. We're also going to add some feta in at the end, which I think tomatoes and saffron play really well together. I also think that saffron goes really well with like cream and dairy, so that's why we're adding in the feta cheese at the end. So I'm going to let these chicken thighs brown. You can also use chicken breasts if you want. I think I've made a similar dish with salmon as well. Now how we're gonna treat the saffron in this recipe is we're going to grind the saffron threads with some salt. And in the book, I say use a mortar and pestle, but I actually don't have one. And if you don't have one like I do, I'm using a muddler. I'm using the back of it. And I have an olive wood bowl. So I'm going to take the saffron threads and about a ½ teaspoon of salt, and I'm just going to muddle it all together. And what it's going to do, it's breaking down the saffron threads into a powder, and that will help me incorporate the saffron into the sauce. So I'm doing just like that. And I'm going to put it down just so I can get a little more leverage on this. But you can see what I'm doing here. The chicken is now, it's cooking on the skillet, but we're going to finish it off in the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you haven't already preheated your oven, this is a good time to do that. All right, so these chicken thighs have some really, really nice color on them. I've seared them for about 5 to 6 minutes on the skin side, and then I flip them over, and I just got a little sear on their bottom, and I'm gonna remove them from the pan, and you can remove them to a plate, or I have a little quarter sheet pan here. One thing I didn't mention is before I seared the chicken, I seasoned it with salt and pepper about an hour ahead of time. And what that does, and I'm just going to drain, there's a lot of fat that is rendered out from the chicken skin, so I'm just going to save some of that right there because we don't need all of it for this recipe. So I seasoned it with salt and pepper about an hour before I cooked the chicken, and that lets the salt penetrate the chicken flesh, and that will make it just a lot more tasty, and it really sinks the seasoning in. Now I'm gonna add my chopped onion. You can use I use a yellow onion or a sweet onion work really, really well here. And I'm going to saute this until the onion becomes translucent. And this is where I'm going to add a little bit of pepper. And the muddled saffron with the salt. So that's kind of how that looks. So it's got this yellow color that has infused in from the saffron threads, and I'm going to activate that now by pouring it into the heat and onto the onions. And so that it'll further infuse into the sauce when we add the tomatoes in just a second. But right now, what you're seeing is the color that we've kind of muddled in with the salt. I mean, it's already really, really nice and vibrant with these onions. So you see this really beautiful golden color. And the aroma from the saffron, you can already smell it. It's just lovely, lovely, lovely. I mean, saffron in itself is, it's a very distinct aroma, and it's just this nuance that really is a background player, but adds so much when you're building flavors in a recipe. It's so just wonderful and exciting. So I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit and get this going. And then I'm going to add my garlic. Now, what I like to do, you can chop your garlic, you can use a garlic press. But I love my microplane. It's one of my favorite kitchen tools, and I love microplaning my cloves of garlic into my recipes. So I did some right there, but I'll just show you right here, because I think the distribution of the garlic is a little bit better, and I like the way, and it's just easy and fun. So I'm gonna microplane some of this. I use about 3 cloves of garlic in this recipe. You can use more or less depending on your taste. Okay, and then I'm gonna add the rest here. And that doesn't need to cook for long, but it's gonna combine with the onions. And again, the smell right now. So what we're doing is just building flavor, and the saffron helps with that, the salt, the pepper, it all comes together. All right, my onions are translucent, and right now I'm going to add my tomatoes. So again, these are a mixture of cherry and grape tomatoes. It all, it really depends on what you're seeing at the market, what you might be seeing at your farmer's market, but these look really, really good today. I know Melissa's Produce has wonderful tomatoes of all kind, and it's the end of the summer right now, and right now the markets are just brimming with all kinds of wonderful produce. But these are my favorites to cook with because they're so sweet and full of flavor. The flavor is very concentrated into the tomatoes, and it makes a very, very nice sauce. So we're gonna cook this for, I think, about 10 to 15 minutes. The tomatoes will break down, they will expel some of their juices, and we'll have a nice sauce forming. But now it's ready for us to add the chicken back in, or whatever you might be using in this beautiful sauce. And we're just gonna add it, nestle them right down into the tomatoes. My oven is preheated to 375. I'm nestling these guys down into the sauce, and we're gonna cook it for about 20 minutes or so. You want the temperature, if you're using chicken thighs, you want the temperature to be around 185. If you're doing chicken breasts, if you're cooking chicken breasts, you want it to be a little bit lower so they don't dry out. So about 160, you want to pull them at about 160 and let them carry over, cook until they're about 165. And now I'm going to crumble the feta on top. If you have a convection setting on your oven, this is a great time to use it because the skin on the top will continue to crisp up and the feta will get a little bit brown, and that will be really, really nice. So I'm crumbling my feta on top. And the saltiness of the feta, the sweetness of the tomatoes, and the saffron, the aromatic qualities of the saffron are all going to come together and make this really beautiful dish. So I'm going to put this right into my oven, and then we'll let it cook. All right, we have our finished dish. I let the chicken cook between 165 and 185 for chicken thighs. That's totally fine. This is the time where you want to ask your butcher to get you thighs of about the same size so they all cook evenly at the same time. But this is this beautiful dish. You see the golden color from the saffron. The chicken skin is nice and crispy, and we're just going to add a little bit of parsley as garnish to add a little bit more color to the top. So I just have some nice chopped parsley right here. Tarragon would also go really well here. Take it in a different direction, but I love the combination of chicken, tarragon, and tomatoes as well. Why not? So we have that. And then we're gonna plate this up. Now this dish is good as is, but if you want to make a heartier meal out of it, you could add, let's say, you could serve it over some orzo pasta. You could serve it with roasted potatoes, which would be really, really nice. And maybe some rice as well. So, but I think right as it is, it's, you know, beautiful. You have the really beautiful golden color from the saffron in the sauce and these really nice tomatoes. Now I'm just gonna make this very pretty. Just wipe that a little bit. And here you go. Here are the saffron tomato chicken thighs. I hope you make this. I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to enjoy it right now. I love the saffron in this because it's really the only spice that we use. It comes through so well. It's complemented by the acidity and the sweetness of the tomatoes and the tartness of the feta. It's just such a wonderful flavor combination. I hope you enjoy making this. It's such a gorgeous dish and it'll be a wonderful centerpiece for any table. Now that we've made our main course, it's time to move on to dessert. And this recipe is one of my favorites in the book. It's for saffron star bread stuffed with raisins and pine nuts. And if you've never made a star bread before, if you've never seen it, it's basically a dressed up version of a pull-apart bread. We're gonna make everything in a circle. We're gonna stack 3 layers, and then we're going to shape it in the shape of an 8-pointed star. And to start the bread, I'm going to bloom the yeast and the saffron in about a half a cup of warm milk. And you can use any type of milk. You can use almond milk or oat milk, or just so it has something to bloom into. And I'm crushing the saffron like we did with the chicken recipe. I've muddled it with about a tablespoon of sugar. And the sugar is important here because it's going to give the yeast, this is active dry yeast, it's going to give it something to feed on, so we know that it's alive. So what I've done here is, again, I've muddled the saffron just like we did before. I'm going to add that and the sugar into my milk, and then I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast to the warm milk. And the milk is about between 100, 110 degrees. You don't want it too hot because that would also kill the yeast, but it needs to be warm to activate the yeast. I can already see some bubbles, so I know my yeast is working, but I'm gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes. The yeast is gonna eat all that wonderful sugar. You can already tell that the saffron has made the milk a really beautiful yellow color that is gonna come through in the bread dough as well. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes. I know that my yeast is happy. I've bloomed the yeast along with the saffron in warm milk with a little sugar. So you can see where it's bubbly, there's a lot of activity. The saffron has released its yellow color into the milk, and this is gonna go into the dough that we're gonna make, and it's going to give it a really beautiful color and a fantastic taste. So this is a really easy dough to make. I'm just gonna put the dough hook attachment onto my KitchenAid mixer, which makes things very easy. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can easily do this by hand, how you normally would incorporate the rest of the ingredients into your dough. So we're using about 4 tablespoons of butter, sugar and salt, about a 1/4 cup of water, some vanilla, and this is vanilla bean paste, but you can use regular vanilla extract or a vanilla bean if you have it. This is our bloomed saffron and our active dry yeast, and this is about 2.5 cups of flour. So I'm just going to start by putting the flour into the bowl. And then I'm going to cut in my butter, the water, the sugar and the salt, and then the vanilla. The vanilla bean paste is a little harder to get out. It's a little stickier than regular extract, but it tastes so good, I love it. But whatever you have in your pantry is fine. So before I put the yeast and the saffron in, I'm going to just get this started. I'm going to start it on a very low speed so the flour doesn't puff up and go everywhere. I know I've done that before and it hasn't been great for cleanup in my kitchen. So this is gonna just go maybe a little higher. And then it's going to start incorporating all together. And then I'm going to add the bloomed saffron and the yeast in the milk. Now I'm going to add the yeast and the saffron mixture. Pour that all in. I want to get every little bit because I really want the color of the saffron and the aromas to come through and the taste into the bread. So there's that. And so I'll just turn the speed up a little bit and it will knead the dough until what you're looking for is, you want it all to be incorporated, all the flour to be incorporated into the dough. You want it to look smooth. So I'm gonna let this go for about 10 minutes and I don't know about you, but that was a workout. Not really. We have our beautiful dough. It's soft, everything is incorporated. It went for about 10 minutes in the mixer. Everything's soft, incorporated. I'm gonna give it a few kneads by hand, but I can already tell that it's perfect. And you can see some of the saffron threads in it. It's a beautiful golden color. And now all I'm gonna do is transfer this to a greased bowl. So I've just put a little bit of oil in here. Make sure it's greased all up so this dough doesn't stick. I'm going to put it in here and cover it with a towel. And then wait for about an hour. It should double in size by then. If you have a warm spot in your kitchen, that's a great place to put it. Keep it out of the sun. If it's a cold day or if you have your air conditioner on, it might take a little bit longer. Definitely keep it out of the draft of your air conditioning. But it's bread, so you just, want it to rise in a really happy, warm spot. And so, all right, so it's been about an hour. My dough has risen, so I'm going to take it out of the bowl and I'm going to roll it into 4 equal balls, and those balls are going to be the layers for my star bread. I'm just dusting my counter with a little bit of flour. You don't need much. It's not a really sticky dough. But that makes me want to talk about the dough for a second. When you're mixing the dough, dough has a lot of sensitivity to your environment. So if you're in a really humid place or your house is very humid, it will need less water. So you might have more of a sticky dough. In that case, you can add more flour to it, but just, judge it as it goes. This dough should not be a sticky dough. It should be very smooth, but it also shouldn't be too dry. So if when you're mixing it, it seems dry or you have crumbles that aren't really sticking to the dough right away, you can add about a 1/4 cup more water. You just want a nice even dough. But just remember that, you can always add more flour if you need it. You can always add more water, but you don't want something rock hard or like really stiff. You want something, you know, kind of nice and airy and soft. So we have our dough that's been rising. I'm just going to turn it out onto the surface. This is super beautiful. I'm just gonna kind of roll it a little bit, not too hard. I love seeing my saffron threads in the dough. And then I'm going to cut it into 4 equal pieces. I have a dough scraper, which is or a bench scraper. It's a very useful tool for this bread. Now you can use, if you have a scale, you can use a scale and be very type A and thorough and weigh out your dough balls so you know that they are exactly the same weight. I'm gonna eyeball this just because this isn't, you don't need to be super precise, but just a little bit precise. So maybe this needs to go over here, you know, just eyeball it, use your judgment. And then I'm going to just kind of loosely and gently shape these guys into little balls. And just want a little bit of tension, not much, because we're gonna roll these out into our flat layers. So I just, being very light, there's one. All right, so these guys, again, I'm gonna cover them. I'm gonna put them in a warm spot that doesn't have a draft, and I'm gonna let them just sit for about 20 minutes. Okay, we're ready to start rolling out our layers for our star bread. While the dough was resting for 20 minutes, I made my filling, which is super easy. For this recipe, it's a 1/4 cup of pine nuts and some raisins. And then I think it's about 3/4 of a cup of raisins. If you have another dried fruit that you prefer, this recipe is really flexible in that respect. You can use dried cranberries, tart cherries, for example. You could use pistachios for your nuts, whatever you think is nice inside. The best part is, oh my gosh, okay, it's the sugar filling. So we have sugar, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. And when you're baking this, along with the saffron, your kitchen is going to smell spectacular. This is a perfect recipe for the fall and for your any fall holiday or just the fall in general. It's very, very festive, and I love the smell of all these warming spices together. And then we have 1 egg that is beaten, and that is, I'm going to put that on the inside of the layers. So I'm going to start with my lovely dough balls. I'm gonna put these guys just right in front of me for the moment. And then I have a sheet of parchment paper that I'm going to roll out the layers onto. I actually have 2 sheets that I'm going to work with, and I'll show you that, how that works in a second. On this first sheet, this is going to be my bottom sheet, bottom layer. The parchment will make it a lot easier to transfer your star bread into the oven. I highly recommend using parchment for this. So I'm just going to put down a little bit of cornmeal just for the bottom. And that looks perfect. We're going to roll out each dough ball into about a 10-inch diameter. And I have my trusty tape measure here. It's just important that everything is consistent and that you kind of know. So I'm just gonna flatten this guy out a little bit. This is my first one. And then I'm going to put it down on my sheet. So you don't have to do that much rolling. If the dough starts sticking, you can always add a little bit of flour, but this doesn't seem to be very sticky today, which is awesome. So I'm gonna start from the middle and roll to the end. And that makes sure that my edges don't get too thin, and it just makes everything roll out evenly. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you're actually gonna, once you have all your layers stacked up on top of one another, you're going to trim it. So don't think you need like perfect circles at this point. You just need it to roll out to about 10 inches. So that's my first layer. I think that's almost there. Pretty happy with it. I see these saffron threads in there. It's so pretty. And it smells delicious. Everything smells delicious right now. All right, so let me just look. So that's about 10. That's about 10. I'm just gonna try to get my ends a little bit more even. Oops. All right. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna grab my pastry brush, and this is where just take a little bit of the egg wash, and I leave about an inch on the outside, an inch border around the edges, and then I'm just brushing in my egg wash, just like this, very easy. Painting is fun, we love painting. All right, and then I'm gonna take about 1/3 of the cinnamon and sugar mixture, and then just eyeball it as you're going. This smells amazing. I think cloves for the holidays, cloves really kind of transport you right into your fall holidays, whatever you're celebrating. This bread, I've brought this bread to Halloween parties. I've brought it to Thanksgiving with my friends. Perfect for Christmas, whatever. And I change up the fillings a lot, but I think to start with raisins and pine nuts is kind of, a good basic start. I love putting cranberries in here too. I think cherries, like dried tart sour cherries, would just be so perfect. All right, so I have a nice layer of my cinnamon and sugar. I have, maybe that border is just a little too big, so you need the border because once you add all your layers and you're making your points of your star, you don't want your filling to spill out of the edges. And then again, I'm gonna take about 1/3 of my raisin and pine nut mixture and just kind of spread it as evenly as possible. Okay, so this is my bottom layer. And this is gonna go, we're gonna save that. I'm gonna grab another sheet of parchment. And you'll see what I'm doing here. You'll get the idea. Take my next dough ball sheet. I'm going to roll it out. Again, 10 inches is what we're going for. All right, this is perfect. So what I'm going to do is remaneuver some things. I'm gonna pull my bottom layer back down so you can see that. And then I'm just gonna flip this right on top. So try to match it up as much as possible. And then this is where the parchment comes in really, really handy. So that's matched up, all right, this is perfect. So I did this flip. And save this sheet of parchment because you're gonna use it for your next layer. And then these are going to match up. I'm going to cover that. This is great. Okay, so I'm just gonna lay this right on top. Carefully. Perfect. So we don't need this anymore. All right, so this is your star bread. Doesn't look much like a star yet, but we are gonna get there. All right, so now we're going to shape our star bread. First, I'm gonna start I'm just gonna kind of seal some of these edges. And then I'm gonna you can use a pizza cutter, like a pasta cutter, and then just kind of, you wanna make as good of a circle as you can. You don't wanna trim that much off. Maybe I trimmed a little too much, but this is good. So now I'm using a 2.5 to 3 inch ring mold, or I mean, you can use like a little bowl or a cup. We're just using it as a guide because I don't want to cut in the middle because that would ruin our shape. And then I'm using my dough scraper and I'm going to use it to divide the dough. And I want these to be equal. So just like you would cut a pie. So, and you want 8. Okay. Just like that. And this is going to, there we go. There. And one more, just like that. So 1/16. There we go. Don't need this anymore. Now I'm going to take 2 of my arms and lift them up, and then I'm going to twist them twice and have them meet in the middle. So that's 1 twist, 2 twists, and then I'm going to kind of attach them at the bottom. So again, so 2 of the arms, lift them up as best as you can, and if some of the raisins fall out, you can just shove them back in. So again, 1 twist, 2 twists. There we go. It looks pretty. And now we're gonna let this rest for another 20 minutes. Cover it, and then we're gonna bake it. At this point, you'll wanna preheat your oven to 400 degrees. So I'm just gonna cover it. My kitchen's pretty warm right now. I'm gonna let it sit for about 20 minutes, and then we'll pop it in the oven. All right, so our bread has been resting for about 20 minutes. It's kind of puffed up for the final time, and I'm just gonna finish it off. So in the recipe that you guys have, it just says to finish it off by adding a little egg wash, which I am doing. And I think in the recipe it says to use an additional egg and mix it with a little water or milk. I had egg left over from when I was initially adding the filling. So all I did was just put in a little bit of milk to that egg and just kind of use the rest of it. So you may not need the whole egg. I'm gonna add a little turbinado sugar just on top. This really isn't, it's a sweet bread when you have the filling, but in general, it's not a terribly sweet bread. And I love the texture of sugar on top. So I'm just gonna lightly sprinkle, and that just makes it even more festive. Just a little turbinado sugar. This is totally optional. So there we go. We got a little dusting of turbinado sugar, which is, again, totally optional. I have so much that I like to use it. And I'm gonna transfer this to my baking sheet. My oven is preheated to 400. I'm gonna use a little peel to do this, just because I don't want to totally disrupt my star bread. Again, the parchment makes this so much more easy. I don't want any of the arms to kind of get squished or anything. Just putting this on a little sheet pan. And now it's gonna go right into the oven. Okay, here we are. It's the moment of truth. The Saffron Star Bread is finished. It was baking for about 25 minutes at 400 degrees in my oven. Now keep in mind that everyone's oven is a little bit different, so you wanna just make sure that your bread sounds hollow. And with this bread in particular, you wanna make sure the center is cooked through. I use a digital thermometer and I kind of stick it into the side, and I make sure that it registers about 190 degrees in the center, because all those layers stacked up on each other, you wanna just make sure that it's heating all the way through into the center. But otherwise, my house smells amazing right now. All of the spices and the saffron About halfway through cooking, you start to smell everything, and it's just so delicious. You have the really beautiful golden color from the saffron. You see some raisins peeking through, but here it is. It's the finished star bread. I hope you all enjoyed going on the saffron journey with us today. I know you're gonna love exploring the rest of the book. Emily's photos and her photo essay in the back are going to take you right back to Greece, and I know you're gonna love cooking through the rest of the recipes in the book. I want to shout out to Robert Schuller and the team at Melissa's Produce. Thank you so much for letting us share saffron with all of you. I want to thank Burlap and Barrel for these wonderful tea towels and for supplying us with saffron, and Yorgos Toragas also, who supplied us with saffron directly from Greece for the recipes in this book as well. Thanks to all of you, and I hope to see you again soon.